Are you guys ready for the best build guide out there? Well, we're here to help you out.
Not only are we going to show you how to build this PC step by step, we're going to benchmark it like we normally do, but we're also going to show you how to upgrade it and benchmark it with those upgrades so you can come back here in a few months or a year when you feel like you need to upgrade the system and follow the guide to upgrade it. So yes, this is going to be the most in-depth build guide we've ever done, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. But before we dive into it, let's hear a word from today's sponsor.
Today's video is brought to you by Lexar and their new NM790 Gen 4 NVMe SSD with exceptional performance of up to 7,400 megabytes per second read and 6,500 megabytes per second write, with capacities of up to 4 terabytes, and is also compatible as an upgrade drive for the PlayStation 5. It does all this while consuming 40% less power than DRAM cache-enabled SSDs on the market. This SSD is perfect for your next workstation or high-end gaming PC, and you can learn more by checking the link in the description down below. And big thanks again to Lexar for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get into the video, shall we?
Kicking it off, we have the i3-12100F. This is a 4-core, 8-thread processor, and for $600, you really can't beat this thing in terms of price to performance. And just like many i3s and i5s and Ryzen 3 and 5 as well, this comes with a stock cooler that'll have thermal paste pre-applied, so you don't need to buy extra thermal paste, you don't need to buy an extra cooler unless you really want to. Now for the motherboard, we have this Gigabyte B760M DS3H AX DDR4. Now we bought a B760 so that it is 13th gen ready out of the box. So that means you could go with 12th gen or you could go with 13th gen, and you could, in theory, depending on your power supply, go up to something like even an i7 if you wanted to. This is DDR4, that's another important part. That means you have to buy DDR4 RAM. You can't just mix and match DDR3 and 4, DDR5 and 4. Now, speaking of DDR4 RAM, this is only 16 gigs. It's dual channel, which we highly recommend. You get the best speed, the best bang for buck in dual channel, but it is 2 8 gig sticks at 3200 megahertz, non-RGB, so really plain Jane, but it's nice and cheap. And now for storage, we have a Silicon Power 1 terabyte NVMe M.2 SSD. It is Gen 4, which means it's going to run at the fastest capable speeds. And the fact that it's M.2 means that it's this form factor here. You plug it straight into the board, it's an M key slot, and you don't have to worry about any cables or wires. And these are faster than a traditional 2.5-inch SSD.
Now for the graphics card, one of our favorite options right now. This is the XFX Swift RX 6600. You got 8 gigs of VRAM and the ability to stretch into 1440p gaming if you want to. It's only around $200, $210 right now on Amazon. If you use the affiliate links in the description down below, you'll get the most up-to-date pricing and support us if you guys like watching our content. But this is a really awesome card for this build in particular and will be a great starter point for anyone getting into PC gaming on a budget. And for the power supply, we went with the Gigamax 600 watt 80 plus bronze. We've used this power supply a ton because the power supply market at the time of recording this video, a little bit weird, but this is a very reliable power supply and it is 600 watts, more than enough wattage to power this build. In all honesty, you could get away with like 450 watts if you wanted to, but the idea is with this power supply, we can easily upgrade, and we'll show you those upgrades later on. And the fact that it is 600 watts and a really great price and reliable, it makes it a perfect choice for this PC build. And of course, for the case, we have the Bitfenix Nova Mesh M, which is a case we've used a ton here on the channel, but it's just so awesome for the money. 3 ARGB fans pre-installed, mesh up front, tempered glass, and it looks great. All the builds that we've used it with look really awesome. They even have a white version as well if you want to go that route, but it's a very awesome budget case, and it's not going to sacrifice in certain areas like airflow in exchange for aesthetics. It does both really well. Now, what we're going to go ahead and do is show you step by step how to build this PC. We're going to start with getting the motherboard ready, then get the power supply in the case, plop everything together, and then we're going to benchmark this PC in our favorite games. But not only that, after the benchmarks, we're going to be upgrading it with a newer i5, a 13th gen i5, and most likely an RTX 4070, a really good upgrade path for this system. And not only showing you the performance of it, we're going to show you how to upgrade this system so you have everything you need for this system to upgrade now and in the future.
All right, guys, so we always like to start off by building the motherboard out first. So we're not even going to touch the case, power supply, or graphics card yet. So we're going to open up our B760M, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this out of the box in the anti-static plastic. Now, a question we get a lot is, do you recommend an ESD wristband? And, you know, the short answer is yes. Do we ever use one? No. That's not something that we do very often, just because we have never really had issues with static. But if you want the peace of mind, guys, it's like $5 to get one of those. So once we get our board out of the wrap, kind of inspect it, make sure everything looks good on it. It is pretty common to get used boards accidentally. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open up the CPU socket first. It's one of my favorite first steps. So we're going to pull down and then out. and then that's gonna open like that. And then you just have to use your finger and basically pull this open, leave that plastic cover on. It makes a nice satisfying pop when you actually open it. All right, now we're gonna go ahead, open our i3 box. And the i3 box is going to come with two things. It's gonna come with our cooler, which will be inside the cardboard, and then our i3, which is right here. It's nice and rectangular shape. That's how LGA 1700 will be. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this i3 and we're gonna find the arrow. On Intel, you have two arrows. You have an arrow here and then a tiny little gold arrow there. Commonly, you're gonna have an arrow on that plastic piece, which happens to be right here. So that means it's gonna go in like that. Is you're gonna take that processor and you'll notice these notches will also line up and you're gonna gently basically drop it into place. And sometimes it'll be a little bit off. You can just use your finger and kind of nudge it. You don't wanna push down with your finger. Just push sideways if you need to get it lined up. But as you can see, we're lined up. Everything looks pretty good in there. I'm gonna take this and you are gonna have to kind of, with LGA 1700, I like to take my finger, push down. Oh, there's that pop, that thing launched. And just like that, you shouldn't have to, you know, push down or anything. The bracket will do the work for you. So now that we got our CPU in, that was pretty easy, right? We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna pull out our stock cooler. So as I said before, this does come with thermal paste pre-applied. That's what this is right here. A nice big copper slug in the middle so that you get some really good thermal conductivity. This is a step that's very subjective. A lot of people do it differently. I really like basically taking it and, you know, you don't have a logo that's centered anymore, so you can really put this any way you want. But I like to find the CPU fan header, which you see right here where it says CPU fan. It's that 4-pin. And I basically like to take the cooler and then run the cable kind of underneath of it. But you have to be really careful, because if you accidentally do this and this gets, the cable gets in between the copper and the CPU, then you're gonna get some overheating really fast and you'll know right away. You just gotta be really careful when you're doing this. I'll even sometimes kind of get everything lined up like so. And then I'll kind of come back in. That cable underneath there, and the cable should still be a little bit loose. That's how you know if you have it pinched or not. So since it's still a little bit loose, I know we're good. We're gonna make sure, another thing too that it's really hard to demonstrate straight on camera, all of these can turn. So if you notice they can turn one way or another, you really want to make sure that you have them spun into the locking position, which is going to be all the way to the right. And I believe all Intel stock coolers were like that. So spin it, all of them to the right. Some of these were actually unlocked. And what would happen is you could press these in, but if it's unlocked, it can very easily fall off. So now what I'm gonna do is I like to hold the cooler up. You can also check and make sure. You see how all 4 of my plastic pieces are in here? So I'm gonna do 2 this way so you guys can see what it looks like from the top. And I like to do opposing corners. So both my thumbs, it's gonna take a lot of pressure. You should hear really nice clicks. Now I'm gonna do the other 2 from the back so you guys can see it. So that's gonna be, you notice how these ones are nice and spread apart. You know that it's locked in. These ones are nice and loose, right? So we're gonna go ahead, do the same thing. I want you guys to watch what happens from the back here. Just like that. We got nice audible clicks. And now a stock cooler should always be strong enough to do this. If your stock cooler falls off, you didn't have it on right. So now we're gonna plug in that 4-pin I was telling you guys about. Just like that. So now that we got that done, that was pretty easy. Let's go ahead and go to probably the next most satisfying step that I think everybody loves to do, installing the RAM. Now, a question you may have is, can you do 4 sticks? Of course you can. If your motherboard supports 4, like this one does, then of course you can go for 4. So we're gonna go ahead and get our 2 OLOy sticks out, and brands really don't matter a ton with RAM, by the way, guys. There obviously is certain compatibilities with RGB software and whatnot, but this is DDR4 RAM. That's really the main thing that matters to me. It matters that it's matching and it's DDR4. So we're gonna open slot 1 and 3. You'll actually notice this board says first bank 1 and then bank 3 over here. So B2 and A2. So we're just gonna open it like this. Some motherboards, you don't have to open all 4. Some of them will only have on like a locking side and then one that opens. But we're gonna take this, I'm gonna do the one furthest away so you guys can see easier. Line up that bottom notch, see what happens if I try to do it backwards. You really can't screw this up. It just won't go in. So now that we have everything in, you're not gonna push these. If you have to push these, you're probably not doing something right. You should be able to push down pretty hard, I will say. It almost to the point that sometimes it even hurts your thumbs. You have to push that hard. So we'll do that one more time. Once again, making sure that we do have the spacing right, 1 and 3. And pretty much all motherboards will be 1 and 3. Oh, this one actually didn't go in all the way, so I'm gonna go back in. There we go. See, it takes a lot of force. That might have not booted with how it was. You know, if it's slightly out, sometimes that's not enough for it to actually make full contact. All right, the last thing we have to do on this board, and this is gonna require a screwdriver. It's the only step so far that we need a screwdriver for. Installing our M.2. Now our M.2, this is a PH2 Phillips bit. If I try to use this, it is too big. It will not work. You're gonna need a PH1. I'll let Jonah really see that size comparison there. So we're using our LTT screwdriver here, but we're gonna go ahead and swap to our PH1. So now that you guys can see a little bit better, we got our screwdriver set to loosey-goosey mode. And this is a heat sink, which is gonna require us taking the little heat sink cover off so that the thermal pad will actually make contact. Now we're gonna open our 1TB M.2 NVMe SSD. So keep in mind, the form factor is M.2 or M key as they sometimes call it. And then the speed is NVMe, that's the easiest way to remember it, NVMe Gen 4. So what we're gonna do is that, once again, it can only go in one way. If I try to do it this way, it physically won't work. So it's gonna go in the keyed slot, and you kind of put it in at an angle. I don't know if we can fully capture this on screen, but you usually don't put them straight in, like downwards. You kind of put them in at an angle, and then you're gonna push down. Now, obviously, when I push down, it just comes back up. So that's where we're gonna have to put this heatsink back on. Some of these, you don't have a heatsink, you just screw it in with an M.2 screw, which is a really tiny screw. I want you guys to see one of these because a lot of people don't know they exist. That's an M.2 screw. It is absolutely tiny. No other screw on your board will be like that. Put our heatsink back in. You gotta be really careful when you do this because if you accidentally kind of, install it wrong, you might have your NVMe pop out of the slot. But it should be pretty obvious if it's in or not. Now this one, we're going to barely, like these do not need to be tight. I'm just gonna take 2 fingers. Barely twist it, okay? Because otherwise you'll break that screw off because it's so tiny. To recap, motherboard's good to go. We have our i3 installed. We have our stock cooler over it. We made sure that it's on properly. We have our 2 sticks of 16 gigs RAM installed in bank 1 and bank 3. And then we have our M.2 installed in the topmost slots. Now, one little tip, if your M.2 doesn't show up, try it in a different slot. There's a good chance if you go with a different generation of motherboard, or if you go with like a SATA M.2, it may not work in the top slot. We've had that happen quite a bit.
Now that we have the motherboard ready to go, we're gonna get the power supply installed in this case. Now, we're gonna go and open up the power supply. This is a non-modular power supply, meaning all the connectors that you need are already installed, and honestly, some connectors you don't need. That's the only downside with non-modular, is you're gonna have to do a little bit of cable management to hide the cables you don't need, but it's very user-friendly, and you don't have to worry about plugging up something wrong with a modular power supply. So now they have the power supply out of the bag. You do also in the box get a power cable, which you need to use to power the PC. And you do get the power supply screws with some zip ties, and then the rest is just foam, so you don't need to worry about that. Now to install the power supply in the case, what we're gonna go ahead and do is start with the case. We're gonna take this backside panel off by unscrewing these thumb screws. Now sometimes, you see, like sometimes the thumb screws are not going to thumb screw because they tighten it down way too tight at the factory. Use a PH2 screwdriver if it does happen to where you can't get it off with your thumbs. So we're gonna unscrew these thumb screws like so. Just get them started is all you really need to do. All right, so we're gonna move this side panel out of the way. And one little trick we've been doing recently here, because we lose a lot of screws, is put the screws right back in the case. Let's see if I can see them here. So you don't lose them, just screw them back in there. But remember, when you try to put your side panel back on, if it's not going on right, it's because the screws are blocking it. But this is a good way to not lose your screws. Now we're gonna go ahead and undo this mess of cables, which might look a little intimidating, but don't worry, we're gonna show you guys which ones you need to plug up and which ones you need to shove into that power supply basement. So we're gonna undo this little bread tie here. And as you can see, we have a bunch of cables. Now, when you install your power supply, you wanna do fan facing down, because with this case, it pulls in air for the power supply from the bottom. Now, that's one reason why you don't wanna put this PC on carpet, because it will suffocate that power supply, and well, it's not good for the power supply to not have air to breathe. So fan facing down, and make sure you put this on a surface to where there is a little bit of space in the bottom so it can actually breathe in air for the power supply. So we're gonna go ahead and take the power supply, move some of these cables out of the way. You can just pull them out of the way so they're not blocking. And we're gonna go ahead and slide in the power supply. Now, once it's in there, you need to check the back of the case, which has all the screw holes, which right now they're not lined up. So we're gonna go ahead and make sure all the screw holes line up, which, as you can see, one right there, one right there, one right there, and one right there. But we're gonna go ahead and switch to the right bit here. Okay, so we got the PH2, good to go. And we're gonna take these coarse threaded screws, which did come in the bag with your power supply with the cable ties. And we're gonna go ahead and screw it in. This is a really weird way to screw in a power supply. You don't have to lean over the table like I'm doing right now to screw in the power supply. We're gonna go ahead and screw in all 4 corners. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Now obviously, just with any screws in a PC build, once you start feeling it getting tight, don't overdo it. You don't need to really crank things down. This is gonna be more than sturdy, and as you can see, that power supply ain't going anywhere. Now that we have the power supply installed, we wanna go ahead and get our motherboard in there. But before we do that, I wanna show you guys what comes with the motherboard, because we're gonna be using that stuff to get the motherboard installed properly into the case. First thing that's very important, the I/O shield. This little metal bracket here that you might be like, what the heck is this? Well, it's basically a cover for the back of the motherboard here. As you can see, it covers the back I/O, hence I/O shield. It's like the protector of the I/O. And what you gotta do is install this inside the case. Now this can be a little bit tricky, but we're gonna go ahead and take the glass off right here so we can get access to the inside of the case from the front. And we're gonna go ahead and take the tempered glass off. Be very careful, this is tempered glass, meaning it's glass. It's very breakable, so be sure to put it somewhere where you will kick it, right here.
Wow, great advice.
Hopefully you picked up on my sarcasm. Again, because I feel like I will lose these screws. We always lose these screws. Now we're gonna take the I/O shield and make sure you're putting it in properly. So as I showed you before, the I/O shield goes like this. So you are gonna be installing the motherboard like this. So just kind of visualize it outside of the case and be sure to know that the I/O shield has to go in like this. So we're gonna go ahead and keep it holding like this and go to this cutout right here. This cutout is where the I/O shield will go. We're gonna go ahead and line it up, and you just have to push all the corners in and you'll feel it click into place. Sometimes the I/O shield can be a bit finicky, but there's just these little tabs that you push in on each side, and from there the I/O shield is installed. Now before we drop the motherboard in the case, because we are ready to do that, let's go over the rest of the stuff that comes in your motherboard box. These are SATA cables. For this build, we don't need to use SATA cables because we're using an M.2 NVMe SSD. It goes straight on the motherboard and you got your storage. But if you want to add things like a hard drive or an SSD, you will need these to plug directly into the motherboard, and they do plug in right here with these 2 SATA slots. This is becoming an older standard. NVMe is becoming the future, honestly. But there is a lot of affordable storage options out there that you can get if you want more than 1 terabyte to store all your games. So hang on to these, they will be important if you do upgrade in the future. Now this right here is very important for those who don't run Ethernet, meaning you don't run an actual cable for internet to the back of your computer. This is a Wi-Fi adapter, which you might think is pretty standard with any device that connects to the internet. Well, not really. The motherboard needs to come with Wi-Fi if it's gonna actually have Wi-Fi ready to go, or you'll have to buy an adapter separately. So this is important to hang on to. Now, before we flip the case over and install the motherboard, we're gonna go ahead and grab this bag of screws that's being held on by a bread tie. This is gonna have all the screws you need to, well, get the motherboard installed. And I believe there should be some screws in there for the graphics card as well. So pretty much all the screws you're gonna need to build this PC. So definitely hang on to this. Now what we're gonna go ahead and do is lay this computer on its back like so. And now that we have the case laid down like this, we're gonna take our motherboard and we're going to grab it by the CPU cooler. Don't be scared. If you installed it properly, like Jackson showed you, it should be perfectly fine. And we're gonna go ahead and lay the motherboard in. Now, this is a micro ATX motherboard in a micro ATX case, so we should have no problems fitting this thing nice and snug. Now, the best practice I like to recommend is making sure to line up the I/O when you get the motherboard in. That's the best way to make sure everything is where it needs to be. So we're gonna go ahead and line up the I/O with the motherboard. All right, so the I/O is lined up with the motherboard, and to verify, you can check the back right here and make sure that there are no ports covered up. So as you can see, we have our Wi-Fi out, we have our USB, we have our HDMI, which we won't be using. We'll talk about that in a second. And as you can see right here, we actually have a little thing that's blocking that USB port. Don't you love that, motherboard manufacturers? Why do you include this? This is something you might just need to pop out. So we're just gonna wiggle this back and forth. Honestly, it might not come like that for you, so don't worry about it. But we're gonna take that off. And as you can see, everything is coming out properly. So we have the HDMI, we have the 2 USB 2 ports, PS2 for whatever reason, USB 3, Ethernet, and the audio ports. Now that that's lined up, you should see, oh wow, the screw holes are lining up as well. So we have a bunch of screw holes we need to screw in. We have 2 up here, 2 at the very top. We do have, actually, whoop, there's a nub. So we have 2 right here as well. And then we have 2 more on the sides. So in total, we have 6 screws we need to screw in. And to do that, we're gonna be using fine thread motherboard screws, which come in this little baggie that was inside the baggie within the baggie. So we're gonna go ahead and open this little baggie up and pull out the screws that we need. All right, so we're gonna pour out all the screws, and as you can see, this right here is our fine threaded screw, which has like a little top on it. That's the best way I can describe it. And this right here is a coarse threaded screw, which you did see us use to install the power supply. Do not use this for the motherboard unless the case specifies it, but if you're following this build guide specifically and going with this case, you won't have to do that. You'll just need to use these fine thread screws. Now we're gonna go ahead and grab a bunch of those screws out of the pile. All right, so we got all our screws right here ready to go. And we're gonna take our screwdriver and screw in the motherboard. Very straightforward. We're gonna go ahead and start with the top right and just get her screwed in. There's one over here by the CPU fan header, so make sure to get that one. Okay, and then we're gonna go down to these two right here. The one over here that's behind the I/O. It's a little hidden. Then we have one below it and then one right here. Boom, you're good to go. Now, there are extra places where you can add more mounting risers, but for the sake of this build, this is more than secure. I mean, this thing is not going anywhere. I'm moving this board around and it's very, very secure, so we're good to go. Now what we're gonna go ahead and do is lift it up and go over everything we just did. Now what we just finished doing was installing the power supply, which we put right here and screwed it in, and it's easily able to power the system. That's the point of the power supply. And then we got the motherboard installed with all the screws and everything, with the I/O shield properly good to go, no ports are blocked. Now what we're gonna go ahead and do is start plugging things up. This is the part where it might get a little scary, but don't worry, plugging things up, especially for this build, is very simple. We're gonna show you step by step how to do that.
All right, so now that we have the motherboard installed and our power supply, the first thing I like to do is just kind of get the power supply cables kind of out of the way, because we don't want to make this too complicated. So we're going to do the hardest step first, which in my opinion is the front panel. That's going to be your power switch, your power LED, hard drive LED, sometimes reset switch. Every case has different options when it comes to this stuff, but typically the motherboard is always going to have this panel connector on the right-hand side if you're on Matt's side. All right, so Matt, are you ready for this?
I'm ready, feed it to me.
So we're gonna go ahead and find that cutout nearest to keep this nice and clean, which happens to be right there.
All right, so now that I have the front panel connectors, we're gonna go ahead and plug it up in this order. We'll have a diagram on screen to show you guys how it works. And this is where we're gonna plug in our front panel, this row of pins right here. First, gonna start with the hard drive LED, and you'll see a diagram on screen of how this layout's gonna go. But hard drive LED first, it's gonna go into the bottom left, boom, just like that. Now, we're gonna take the power LED, which is an activity LED on the top of the case. We're gonna take the power LED, plus and minus. The plus goes into the top left, and the minus goes into the one on the right next to it. So before we go any further, we have the hard drive LED on the bottom and the power LED up top, the plus and the minus. In this case, all there is the power switch, because the reset switch, which is on the top of the case, is used to change the RGB in the case. So we're gonna take this power switch and we're gonna put it on the top one right here. And there we go. We have the power switch plugged in. Now that power switch is very important because it allows the power button to actually work and turn the system on. And yeah, that's front panel. That's probably the hardest part in terms of what to plug up. And now we're gonna move on to some of the other front panel connectors.
So right now we're going to stick to the bottom of the motherboard, which is going to be our HD audio next. This board actually, well, sorry, this case does not have any USB 2. It just says USB 3. So now we're going to take our HD audio, and I like to make sure that, we're not super tangled up in other cables here, because then it just becomes a cable management nightmare. And usually this is always going to be on the left side of the board if you're looking at Matt's angle.
And to plug it in, there it is, on the far left side of the board, that little row of pins right there, that is labeled on the motherboard, F audio, front audio. So we're gonna make sure to line up the missing pin, which is on the bottom, with the header. My hand might block this for a second, but we're gonna go ahead and plug it in. And like so, it's there. Your front panel audio is good to go, so you can use headphone and mic on the top of the case with this system.
All right, now USB 3.0 is the next thing we're gonna be plugging in, and this is really the last thing on the case itself as far as the front panel or front headers go. And that's gonna go right through this hole here. Keep in mind, every case, and depending on what board size, they're always gonna be different on how things fit.
From the USB 3, as you can see right here, is this header. Now we're gonna make sure to do the little keyed out section right here. Make sure it plugs in, only goes in one way. And make sure you plug it in as straight as possible, because these pins can tend to get bent a little bit if you plug it in the wrong way. We're gonna go ahead and line it up. You'll hear a click. And boom, just like that, the USB 3 header is plugged in, and now you have USB 3 on your case.
So now that we have the main case stuff plugged in, we're gonna go to our essential motherboard items. So the number one most essential motherboard item is going to be your 24 pin or 20 plus 4 pin. You're gonna hear that term a lot, plus a certain number of pins. So we're gonna go ahead and feed that right through here, and Matt can twist it as he needs since we have a really large cutout.
So yeah, we're gonna make sure that +4 stays attached to the 20 pin because we wanna make sure to plug it all in. And this is where that connector is gonna go. It's pretty obvious once you see the connector versus where it goes, it does make a whole lot of sense. And we're gonna make sure to get the clip on this side right here where the clip is located. And now we're gonna go ahead and line it up with the connector, push in, and you'll hear a slight click, but you'll make sure it's in there. You can tug on it a little bit, but there you go, it's in there. Now we're gonna push this cable back through, and the 24 pin is now installed.
So the next thing we're gonna be plugging in is the also very essential CPU power. So these can come in a few different variants. A lot of times it'll be a 4+4 pin, so this can be split apart into 4+4, but in this case, it's actually a solid 8 pin, and they give you an extra 4 pin included. So I'm gonna go ahead and run these through. I think Matt's only gonna need an 8 pin though in this case.
Yep, just an 8 pin, and there is the 8 pin right up here. Same thing, it's going to clip at the top, so we're gonna make sure to flip it like so. It's kind of hard to see right now, but we'll be sure to put it right there. And before I push it in, that's what it's supposed to look like. We'll go in there and you hear a little bit of a click. You'll hear the clips actually locking in, and from there, you can pull these cables back in. And now that we plugged in all the main power to the motherboard, we're gonna go over some of the optional things you can plug in as well.
So as you can see, and you might be a little worried, why do we have so many extra connectors on this power supply? Well, we're actually not gonna need most of these. That's why they make modular power supplies. We're gonna talk about this in just a minute. This is our PCIe power for our graphics card, but we're not at that step just yet. So we're gonna put that off to the side. And then these are Molex connectors. These are pretty outdated. We don't have anything on this board that needs that. But then that brings us to our last connector that we haven't used, SATA. SATA is going to be these flat connectors like so, and we're gonna be using this one, just one of these. We have a lot, but we're only using one to power our ARGB hub. This powers our fans and our ARGB headers in this case. And that is going to plug in just like this. And this is also keyed, so it can really only go in one way. And now, like I said earlier, there's a lot of things that are interchangeable. Some things are the same, some things aren't. A lot of these hubs are totally different than each other, but what matters is that they're often powered by SATA. Okay, so now that we got our just extra stuff plugged in, I'm gonna put that stuff off to the side that we don't need. This is the last connector we're gonna need. That graphics card is going to require, I believe, one 8 pin, which technically with the PCIe, it's a 6+2. Because as you can see, I can disconnect this one. We're gonna leave them together. And I'm basically gonna find the best cutout, which in this case, you guys can see we have a really nice cutout for that connector. Sometimes you don't get that, and you just have to find whatever is the cleanest, shortest run. And I'm gonna run that PCIe right through here, and then Matt can grab it from me.
Here it is, I got it. So yeah, here's the connector coming out. This is where we're gonna use the power of the graphics card. Now the next step is to get that graphics card installed, and then we'll just plug this right into the graphics card.
All right, guys, let's get this graphics card unboxed. We often get asked what brand, what size, what this, what that. You know, honestly, brand doesn't really matter a ton. This is just an RX 6600. You can get it in many different variants. I believe this one is actually is this a 3-fan? So this one in particular is a 2-fan RX 6600. You could get a 3-fan if you wanted to. It doesn't really offer any major performance benefits or anything, but hey, it does look cool and it fills up a case nicely. But this nice beefy 2-fan I think is gonna look really good as well. Not bad, not bad, okay. And as you can see, the ports will come plugged. Just whatever ports you're gonna use, you know, you can go ahead and take out. We're probably gonna use HDMI display port, so there you go. Don't forget to take this off. This is a cover for those gold traces, just to make sure they don't get damaged. It will not go into the board like this. I can't tell you how many times we've tried forcing it in and then we're like, oh, this was on. Now that all of our plastic is off, we should be good to go. And this part should be pretty easy. Once again, just inspect your card. Make sure that this bracket's not super bent. Sometimes these will get bent where like the bottom is like facing way in or way out, and that causes the card to not go in straight.
All right, next step to get the graphics card installed. We gotta see which slots we need to take out for the I/O on the graphics card, the video out. To do that, I normally like to put the graphics card in and just kind of inspect where it's going to line up. And in this case, it is these top 2 slots right here. So what we're gonna go ahead and do is remove this cover on the PCI slot so we can unscrew and break off the covers that are right there so we can install our graphics card. So we're gonna move it off to the side like so. We're going ahead and unscrew the top one. This one comes with a screw, which is pretty easy. So we're gonna go ahead and unscrew the screw that we will actually reuse to install the graphics card. and that cover is gonna fall off. Look at that, the thing fell out, and you can just throw it off to the side. Now this other one is a break-off one. Now the main reason why I said to check before you take these out is because when you break these off, you can't put them back in. So if you take out the wrong ones, you're just gonna have these holes in your case that look kind of ugly, honestly. So what you're gonna do is kind of push in from the back, and as you can see, it's laying like so. But what you're gonna do is just wiggle it back and forth. Whee! And then it breaks off. Throw it away, get rid of it. Now, we're gonna go ahead, and before we get the graphics card installed, I'm gonna go ahead and grab another one of the screws. As you can see, this is the same screw we use for the power supply. It's a coarse threaded power supply screw, that's what we like to call it, which it does come with your motherboard screws that we showed you at the beginning. So you will have all the screws you need. And we're gonna go ahead and keep those to the side and slot in our graphics card. Now we're gonna install the graphics card in this topmost slot right here, the 16X slot, Gen 4, ready to go. And to do so, we're gonna go ahead and push this little plastic piece back. This is the lock that keeps the graphics card slotted in. We're gonna push that back. And then from there, we're going to take our graphics card, line it up with the slot. Oops. You might need to pull the shield out a little further. Sometimes it might be blocking it, so I pulled the shield out a little bit. And now you see we're lined up with the slot. We're gonna go ahead and push it in and firmly grasp it. Firmly push it in, and from there, it's locked in. You can see that little lock that we disengaged is now engaged, and it's holding it in. Now you're gonna take those screws that we mentioned before, and we're gonna go ahead and screw it in. Basically, you're gonna screw it in the same way that PCI cover was before on the top one. Now take this little shield here, use the thumb screw, unscrew it, screw it back in. If you wanna be extra safe, you can tighten it down a little bit. And then we're gonna take this PCI power that Jackson fed through. This graphics card, again, only requires one 8-pin for the power. And we're gonna take it and plug it right in. Okay, now that it's in there, we're going to firmly push, and boom, it clips in. And then we can push these cables back through here. So we're gonna go ahead and do, now that we have the system in a functional state, you could turn it on right now and be good to go, is we're gonna show you how to do some light cable management on the back, just to get it nice and clean so it doesn't look like you're an amateur and you don't know what you're doing. You're watching this video, you definitely know what you're doing. And then from there, we're gonna get Windows installed and play some games on it.
All right, guys, well, we're basically at the last step. This is the home stretch. This is the cable management portion. As Matt said earlier, this PC would just work. We could literally leave the panels off even and have it like this and it would work, but we wanna make it look clean. We wanna make sure that we have the least amount of dust buildup, and also just the fact that it'll be easier to work on for troubleshooting in the future. I'm gonna use the included zip ties just for, demonstration purposes. We only get 5. I normally would use a lot more, and that's why we buy them in big packs. First thing I'm gonna do is take all of my extra cables, and I usually like finding something like the hard drive cage. If there's like, let's say the little hard drive caddies in there, just take them out. Unless you really think you're gonna use them, take those out, put them to the side, throw them away. Honestly, hard drive should be banned at this point anyways. That's my hot take of the day. All right, so now, first thing I wanna do is in the front, I remember looking, and this doesn't look very clean. So I wanna pull our 24 pin and our USB 3 kind of off to the side a little bit, and I'm gonna bundle all these together. And you'll kind of see the methodology here in a minute. I basically like to have the least amount of runs as possible for all the cables, just to keep everything looking clean. Now here, I don't like this. It might be a waste of one of our few zip ties, honestly, but I just don't want cables to be exposed through the front of the case when you look into it. Go ahead and snip this one, and I can tuck it back here. So if you watch, snip, and then we'll use the zip ties to our advantage. Look at that, tucks it back there, so now you won't be able to see it in the front. We're gonna go ahead and bundle all these together, so kind of pull them tight, just like so. So you see I'm kind of keeping tension on them. And that's really one of the main, honestly, pieces of advice I have for cable manage is whenever you're like bundling stuff together, keep tension on it. Obviously not so hard that you're breaking things, but if you do that, you'll find that you can get some really clean cable runs. Another thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna unplug this real quick. And feel free to do that if you need to unplug anything to make your cable management cleaner. So I kind of am just experimenting here, seeing what I like the best. All right, so now we got that bundled, and watch these guys here. These ARGB headers, they're really easy when you go to put that panel on. You see how they're moving? You wanna make sure you don't have those super tight, like fan headers, stuff like that, because they will come unplugged. So we're gonna use our last zip tie, our final and last zip tie right here. And feel free to, guys, I mean, I know that this case, you just have a few cable tie points. You can use other spots too, like this hole right here, for example. You could run a zip tie through this hole and out the top. Like you can use zip ties pretty much anywhere you want. So don't be afraid to use different areas than designated. So now we're gonna go through, we're cutting all these. You can use scissors. You could in theory use like a pocket knife, whatever. I like these the best, like some actual snips or flush cutters. So yeah, I think that looks pretty clean, honestly, for only 5 zip ties. I can deal with that. Make sure that this isn't coming through. And obviously what we'll do, because stuff's gonna move around when we put the side panel on, which the side panel in itself is usually a little bit difficult, guys. This side panel only clips in the front, luckily. That's what these 2 points are here. See here and here. So a lot of times your old cases, you have to try to get it in slots here, in which case is really hard because that means you have to start like this and get everything perfect. But with this, I can kind of just get the front in, which there's no cables there, so it should be really easy. Front's in, and now I usually just take my hand and then take my elbow.
Put a little elbow grease.
Put a little elbow grease on it. And these, don't forget guys, these are thumb screws. I don't know what it is with companies and people that like tighten these, but they will tighten them to the point that like the plastic breaks. So you don't gotta do all that. Your PC won't come with this light, by the way. So now what we're gonna do is I just wanna make sure that everything in the front looks clean. So I don't like this. I can see that cable still. So I'm just gonna kind of shove that back the best I can. And then over here, I don't like how you can kind of see, and I don't know if the camera can, you see these cables, that's a little bit unclean to me. So I'm just gonna do my best to kind of shove these off to the side here. Oh, and by the way, if anyone was wondering, because I did just show that and people might be questioning, what is this last fan header? This fan header comes off of your hub. That is so that you can control the fan speed from the hub. But with these cases and these newer style fans, they typically don't run that fast. They run at a really good stable speed 24/7. And I'm not really too worried about having that plugged in typically, right? I think that's about as clean as we're gonna get it. It's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and see if this thing actually turns on. This is the scariest part of your whole PC build. You just put all that time, effort, money, and energy into this. Will it actually turn on with that first click of the button? Let's find out. All right, guys, you've been with us on this whole journey. So I wanna make sure that we continue to show everything, including our first time turn on. So Matt is going to plug in the AC connector. They can only go in one way. And these cords are very easy to find, so don't worry if you ever lose it or anything. If you happen to have like a guitar amplifier, that'll actually work. This needs to be set to our binary number of 1, which means on. Can't tell you how many times we've accidentally not had that on. So the last step, if your front panel is plugged in properly, you should be able to press this button 1 time, and boom. This PC should come on, and keep in mind, if it's the first time boot, even if you have everything plugged into a monitor, it may take a few minutes. And also another thing to keep in mind that's so important, make sure you have your display plugged into the graphics card. Because if you plug it into one of these on the motherboard, 99% of the time it won't work unless you have like a non-F processor and blah, blah, blah. Just make sure, if you have a graphics card, it goes into the graphics card.
Now we hit the power button here and it shuts off instantly. That means it posted and went to the BIOS. So that's a good indicator the system is working properly. And boom, look at that, it works great. Now the next step, and it's a very important step, you have to install an operating system. And we prefer Windows 11, especially with these newer systems. So if you guys wanna know a step-by-step on how to install Windows, you can head over to the PC Bros YouTube channel. We'll be sure to link that down below, our PC Selling Business, where there's an awesome guide on how to install Windows. We have to give a plug to the PC Bros YouTube channel, go subscribe today. You can see that guide, and then from there, you install your games and you're good to go. You'll be able to play games on this PC, and we'll show you guys the performance, and then we're not done there. We're gonna show you guys how to upgrade this thing. Go to a newer i5 and a newer GPU, and then how that thing performs, and show you guys the difference between the two setups. And yeah, we're just getting started. All right, guys, we are now in Call of Duty Warzone. First game we're gonna be playing, full screen, 1080p, balanced preset with no upscaling, no FSR. I really just want to push this thing to its limits without any sort of help of FSR, which is a useful tool, by the way, but not nearly as useful at 1080p. It's mainly useful if you want to stretch into 1440p or higher resolutions, but so far performance is looking pretty good, getting 100 FPS. I'm thinking we're probably gonna hover around the 80 to 90 range with a few dips here and there with this combo, but so far, performance is very good for a $600 PC. Now, can I actually perform in this game? That is a whole other question. Got him! Yeah, buddy! Got him. Oh! Oh! I hit him with a snipe shot and I still didn't get him. Oh, man. There's a lot of people in here. Over there. Ah! Ah! Oh, I was out of grenades. I thought I had one. Oh! Ah! I tried to get my gun back and it didn't work. But hey, now what we're going to do is switch to some Halo Infinite on this PC, another game that utilizes all your PC hardware. And then from there, we're going to run some built-in benchmarks. We're actually going to try Starfield, which isn't going to be ideal for this PC. We're going to show you guys how it works now, and then when we upgrade it. And then we're going to run some Cyberpunk as well, another really demanding game. That's going to be a good comparison to show you what a $600 PC can do, and then how it can perform after you upgrade it with the parts we recommend later down the line.
Alright guys, we're playing some ranked Halo Infinite. I'll show you guys the settings here in just a second when I die. But I wanted this to be like a really good, realistic scenario. You know, a lot of people like playing ranked games, so why not play some ranked Halo gameplay to really prove that this thing could be used for competitive dying gameplay.
Competitive dying gameplay.
So we're max FOV, 1080p, medium setting preset. You could lower some more settings to get 144, maybe higher even. Or you can get clean sweeped in Halo like I am right now. We have this guy here. Oh, yep, wonderful.
Wonderful. Great start.
This isn't even a fair game, dang it.
Yeah, Halo Infinite, we like to test it. Even though it's not a very popular game, it is still a game that uses a lot of your hardware. So really pushing that GPU and CPU. And a game that still runs very well, even though that i3, people say, oh, you're using only an i3. It's more than capable to get high refresh rate in a game like this.
Die! Oh, I got double teamed. He did. They did.
We back.
So that wasn't an assassination, huh?
What?
Ow, my teammate punched me. I didn't mean to let you die. You were so pretty while dying, though.
Oh,
God. You fell right in my grenade. He has to die.
No.
Ah.
But they're going to get the
Instantly
capture.
regretting queuing up ranked. I should have known better.
That's how ranked be.
Yeah, that's how ranked be. I wanted to give this thing a realistic experience though, and as far as playing competitive goes, hey, we did great. Other guys got work to do.
Now you're going to see the built-in benchmarks of Cyberpunk and a little bit of Starfield to show you guys the worst case scenario for this PC. But let's say you build this PC and it's a year later. You're coming back and watching the Toasty Bros. And you're like, I want to upgrade this thing. We got the upgrades for you. We have an i5 13400F and RTX 4070 that'll be very easy to upgrade the system with. And we're going to show you guys how to do it and then how it performs.
Now, one quick thing we do have to mention before you upgrade is you're going to want to uninstall your AMD drivers. If you're going with the upgrade we suggested in RTX 4070, you will need to download DDU, which we'll leave a link in the description down below. As you can see on screen, you open up the file, be sure to select a GPU as the driver you're uninstalling and hit clean and restart for AMD GPUs. And then once it restarts, shut down your computer and you'll be good to upgrade.
So as we talked about, we built this PC for the mindset of upgrading in the future. So we could upgrade just the CPU or just the GPU, but we think it is important to actually keep a good balance. Right now, that i3 at the 6600 is a perfect pairing, very minimal bottlenecking. If we just throw in this i5, you're probably gonna have a lot of bottlenecking. And if you just throw in the 4070, you're gonna have a lot of bottlenecking. So we're doing both.
So what Jackson's gonna do is show you guys the CPU we chose, which we think is a really good option for this system in terms of ease of upgradability and getting good performance. And he's gonna show you exactly how to upgrade it. And then I'm gonna show you about this graphics card, the 4070, which I think is the perfect option for this build, and we'll tell you why.
So one of the reasons why we went with the 13400F is because it's latest and greatest 13th gen, and it has the efficiency and performance cores. This means it's a 10-core 16-thread versus a 4-core 8-thread in the computer currently. And then there's one other major reason for choosing this, and that's the fact that this is pretty much the highest end CPU you can get from Intel that'll still use a stock cooler without overheating. But yes, it is gonna run hotter, but we didn't wanna have to get into all the logistics of adding an aftermarket cooler to keep things simple. So now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna turn the PC on its side to do this upgrade. It should only take us about 5 minutes, so let's do it. All right, so for this upgrade, it's gonna be pretty easy, guys. Just follow along. We're basically going to need to loosen the stock cooler. And to do that, you might be able to use your fingers, but I kind of find it a little bit easier to take something like needle nose pliers, or a flathead would work as well, and just twist each one of those. You should hear like a kind of like a little click, just like that one there. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but just like that. There we go. That one you can kind of hear. And we just twist them for now. You don't need to pull them up just yet. We'll pull them all up at once. So usually you can kind of halfway twist it and then use your finger for the rest, just like that. Just hold down on the cooler, pull each one of these up, and then we're gonna unplug the CPU 4-pin, and boom, we got all of them off at once. So now what I'm gonna do is pull our i5 out. Now this i5 is, as I said earlier, about the best you can really do with the stock cooler, and even then, you know, it's kind of pushing it, but it'll be fine. So here's our i5 13400F. I'm not gonna use the new stock cooler because that'd just be a waste. You know, it has nice thermal paste already on it, and these you can sell for about $15 to $20 on eBay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get the old thermal paste off. We're gonna be using some alcohol prep pads. These are for like medical use, but you can also just use like isopropyl alcohol. You can use acetone, or even like nail polish remover will work. But just get it nice and clean. This stuff will evaporate on its own. So we're gonna go ahead and clean this off. It's a lot better cleaning the CPU while it's in there socketed, because honestly, thermal paste really makes a mess and it kind of stains stuff. We're gonna pull our i3 out. So same way as we put it in, pretty much reverse installation. Be really careful on this part. I can't tell you how many motherboards we've gotten with bent pins because people just aren't careful. You just gotta grab both sides like this and then slowly pull it straight out. Don't wiggle it, don't push down or anything, just pull it straight up and out the best you can so that you don't risk bending pins. We're gonna go ahead and install our i5 now. All right, so here's our 13400F. I got thermal paste on my fingies. This isn't good, guys. But we're gonna line up the arrow just like we did before. I normally actually just look at the notches even, because it can literally only go in one way. And just like before, we drop it in, make sure that it looks like it's lined up, looks good. And now, just like this, latched. There we go. All right, let's go ahead and put a new bead of thermal paste. Since these CPUs aren't square, they're kind of long, I like to do the thermal paste in like a long, skinny line, essentially. Just about like that, and that should do plenty of coverage. So I'm gonna run the cable underneath like before, but before I put this in here to make things easier, I'm gonna go ahead and twist these back to the locking position. So you just twist, don't push down though, because if you push down, it's gonna lock the pins in. But you notice how the pins are all nice and skinny right now. They're not spread yet. So now I'm gonna go ahead and take this. I'm holding that cable in place so that it doesn't get in between the CPU and the cooler. All right, and so now, these are all in the locking position. I'm gonna do opposing corners, and you should hear nice clicks with each one. And then just kind of just make sure all of them are down good. You can always take the back panel off, and then you can still see the back of the motherboard typically, but these all feel nice and good to me. They shouldn't feel loose. So now I'm gonna plug our 4-pin back in. So as I said before, you can kind of confirm that your cable's not pinched by doing this. You should be able to move the cable back and forth just fine. If it's pinched anywhere, this cable will be really stiff and it won't be able to move, and there's a good chance you're not making good contact. So now that we got that done, it's pretty easy, guys. Let's go ahead and do that graphics card.
All right, now for the graphics card upgrade. This is the RTX 4070. Now, before you go on and be like, ooh, the 4070, that's such a weird card. The reason this card makes sense is, one, it is a substantial upgrade over the 6600, and two, if we're playing this out a year from now, I can imagine this card being quite affordable, especially on the used market, or just in general with just price reductions that happen over time with graphics cards. And also it's incredibly power efficient, so it worked very well with that 600 watt power supply. And I think, we'll see which model we have right here, a lot of them just require an 8-pin power, which means we literally just have to unplug that one, put a new graphics card in, and plug in the same cable we were using for the 6600. So let's go ahead and pull this one out. This is a Gigabyte 3 fan model. We do have 12 gigs of VRAM with this graphics card versus 8, so we'll be much better for games like Starfield and Cyberpunk, which we will be rerunning those tests, by the way, to show you guys the difference after upgrading. And we'll verify, yeah, look at that. See, it uses a single 8-pin connector, so this is gonna be a very, very easy upgrade. So be sure to take off your little cover right here. Now your GPU is ready to go. We're gonna take out the existing 6600, which we do recommend, by the way. Sell that thing. If you're gonna upgrade to this graphics card, sell that thing on eBay, get yourself some money, and offset the cost of the upgrade. That's a really good idea to, well, make the upgrade much more worth it. So first step, we're gonna unplug the PCI power, the 8-pin right here, and just put it off to the side, because again, we are gonna need it to plug up to the new RTX 4070. So we're gonna put that off over there. Next step is we're going to open up this PCI cover shield. Again, we're gonna unscrew it right here. And we're gonna do the reverse of how we put this thing in. We're going to unscrew. You see this little clip right here? This is what's holding in the PCI slot into the motherboard. We're gonna go ahead and push it back. And then from there, pull the graphics card out. And look at that. our 6600 is good to go. It looks like it hasn't been in there very long, because it hasn't. So we're gonna go ahead and put in the RTX 4070. You get DLSS and all the fun features that NVIDIA cards have to offer. So you can get to live streaming as well if you want to with this system. Not to say that in its old configuration you couldn't, but this is gonna be an even better step up. Same deal, we're gonna go ahead and line up the graphics card with the top slot, push that in, and then we'll go ahead, you know what, we'll do it this way. We'll go ahead and plug up the 8-pin power, and then we'll take our screws here and go back and do the same thing. Make sure it's lining up properly so you can easily screw them in. And then there's that one. Nice. So yeah, look at that. The GPU is installed, the CPU is installed, and we've upgraded this thing to a crazy 1440p ready gaming PC. We will run the benchmarks at 1080p again because we want to compare to the previous system in Cyberpunk and Starfield. But just know, with this CPU and GPU combo, 1440p gaming is very accessible. So let's go ahead and show some benchmarks of this PC now that it's upgraded, and then wrap this video up and let you all know how you can build this PC yourself by using those links down below.
Alright guys, well thank you for being on this journey with us as we did a full computer build and show you guys step by step how to do it. And on top of that, we showed you guys how to do some simple upgrades, and you guys saw that performance gain. It was pretty big.
Jumping to the 4070 from a 6600 is a big upgrade, and also getting that i5-13400F with the performance and efficiency cores makes this a really capable gaming system. But if you guys are just starting out, for $600, the PC we built at the beginning of this video is absolutely awesome, and you saw the performance of that as well. So if you want to buy the initial PC, check the link in the description down below. They will be affiliate links and they will help us out. Or if you want to buy the upgrades, same thing down below. We hope you can use this as a guide in the future when you build the first PC, you come back and you want to upgrade in the future. Or if you just want a recommendation for a GPU and CPU to upgrade your current system to, check those links down below.
So as always, we hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, check out our other two YouTube channels and also our twitch.tv/toastybros, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
And we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.
Now, if this video was just a little too complicated, or you like having the peace of mind of a warranty, we do recommend PC Bros, which is our PC selling business. And as you can see, we kind of know how to build PCs.
PCBros.tech, gaming PCs, gaming laptops, and so much more. Use code TOASTYBROS2 and check out to save 2% in your next purchase. See you guys later. Goodbye.
Peace.